Have a seat on your porcelain throne. It's time to talk some shit on the Powell Movement.
Welcome to the Powell Movement. I'm your host, Mike Powell, and this week, well, I don't want to talk about what's going on in my life. While we still have hope, things aren't good, and I find myself really sad a lot of the time. While the past 2.5 years have been difficult, it's never been like this. As you can imagine, I've had to compartmentalize my thoughts enough to be able to record these interviews, intros, and outros. But I just power through it like my badass wife has been doing for way too long. I don't know if it's healthy the way I'm handling everything, but it is allowing me to keep recording. And this week's interview with Alex Deibold is another awesome one. I say that, but when we recorded over a month ago, the only thing I really remember from that was hanging up and saying, wow, that was a great interview. When that happens, I know you're going to like it. And it's hard not to like this one. Alex is an Olympic bronze medalist, and he didn't always podium. But when he did, it was at big events like the Olympics, and that's the dream, to get a piece of hardware at the biggest event in the world. Before we get into talking to Alex about his life and times and getting that bronze medal, I'd also appreciate it if you told a friend about the show and subscribe wherever you listen. It definitely helps the show grow. So does sharing my social media posts. But what I really, really want and need you to do is to support my incredible sponsors. They are Elan Skis, Outdoor Research, Stanley, and Best Day Brewing. Now, let's chat with Alex Deibold. When doing my research, it sounds like you're from Vermont, and then you're from California, and then you're from Colorado, and then you're from Utah, and everywhere you've lived is where you say you're from. Like, how long do you have to live somewhere before you say, that's my home?
That's a great question. I think that in the ski town industry, there's a lot of animosity around like who's a local. When I tell people where I'm from, like I was born in Connecticut. I spent all of my weekends in Vermont. I then moved to Vermont, went to high school there. So a man of many places, but like I was born in Connecticut. I grew up in Vermont. I lived in California. I was in Colorado for 10 years, Utah for 6. One of my favorite quotes is from I think it's OAR, from a song. It's like, I feel home when I see faces that remember my own. And home is a lot of places to me.
Okay, so it's pretty much been like since you were 13 years old and you pretty much went to high school, which was like a private academy type place. You haven't had like a full-on home. It's always been you're a traveling vagabond with a home base, but it's like everywhere has been home from you since then.
Yeah, pretty much. Like since my family moved to Vermont for me to go to high school, and yeah, then like, getting named to the U.S. snowboard team, like I lived out of a suitcase. Like 2019, 2020, 21, one of those years, I was on the road 135 days. So my suitcase was my home at some point.
When you travel as much as you do, I mean, are you always bumped up to the front of the plane, and is it always an amazing experience because you're stuck traveling so much?
It used to be. It's not anymore. I've been back in Colorado now for about a year and a half, and have gotten on very few planes. There was a time period, as a big United flyer, no free ads, but I was 1K with them maybe 6 years in a row. So yeah, it was a lot of time up front. It was a lot of lay flat beds going to Europe. It was amazing. And it got to the point, like you travel enough, you get good at it. And I enjoyed it. I am very much back of the bus. My wife calls it was sitting in the back with the chickens and the cows. And one of my coaches once said, it takes 5 minutes to get used to and a lifetime to forget.
Yeah, totally, man. It is really like that. I mean, I only had status for like a few years, but it really feels so much better sitting in the front of that place and getting your drink and being a little bit more comfortable. It does make a lot of difference.
I'm a big dude too. I'm 6'2". Like the leg room in and of itself makes it a lot more comfortable.
And just thinking about all the different places you travel, I mean, being a big guy, you travel to Japan. Are you just a giant there? Do you feel like you're a giant?
Yes. I spent a lot of time in Asia. In the last, 2 decades, it certainly has changed. I remember one of my first trips to Korea, going up an escalator and having people like turn and watch me and look at me because I'm a head taller than most people. But now, I feel like the world continues to shrink. And so, my last few trips over there didn't feel like that as much. But my first trip to Asia, God, would have been 2005, maybe. Yeah, I felt like I had extra eyes on me.
Yeah, you're like a 19-year-old famous guy over there, like a giant, and everybody wants to see the big, tall, white dude over there, I would think.
I would definitely not say I was famous.
Well, just because you stood out because you were white.
Yeah, correct. Yeah.
So maybe not famous, but yeah, you stood out. Like they probably thought he's something because he's big, tall, and he's traveling with all this logoed stuff. But whatever, we're getting way ahead of ourselves. I'm going to jump into your ski career. You start skiing at 2, you start snowboarding at 4. I'm guessing that means you come from a family that absolutely loves being on the hill.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm super lucky, super fortunate. Both my parents, maybe my mom maybe grew up skiing. It was a family affair. I went with my cousins, my aunts, my uncles. It was always like a big thing. And I started skiing basically as soon as I could walk and made this switch over to snowboarding as soon as I was old enough to ask. My mom talks about snowboarding in southern Vermont, Bromley Mountain, and saw snowboarders around. And I went up to her. I'm like, hey, Mom, like, I want to try that. And I got a snowboard for Christmas and skied a few more years after that. But turns out it's expensive to get a lot of equipment. And I was growing so fast. My parents were like, you can't get new skis and new snowboard. Like, you have to pick one or the other. And so stuck to snowboarding and haven't looked back since.
Yeah, you start competing at age 8, which is crazy. But what do you remember from the Voodoo Jib Fest?
I remember showing up and it was in a terrain park at Bromley, Vermont. And same thing. I went up to my parents and I was like, hey, Mom, like the terrain park's closed because of this contest. Can I do it? And she's like, I guess. Yeah, sure. Like, I'll sign the waiver. And I won. And it set the hook. Like, I loved snowboarding and that was my first competition. And I was fortunate that it went well. And so I wanted to do it again. And those early years, it was like the only contest I did. The Voodoo Jib Fest would come to Bromley once a year and I would do it and compete. And that was my introduction to the world of competition.
And so that's a once a year deal. It's like 1996, 97. You're like 12 years old. Half pipe's about to become an Olympic sport. Were you into the Olympics before snowboarding became part of them?
Yeah, I've always been into the Olympics. Like early childhood memories, 96, I would have been 10 when the games were in Atlanta. Summer games were in Atlanta. And I remember there was the Dream Team. And then I think it was the Magnificent Seven, like the gymnastic girls. Like I remember watching Carrie Strug, like stick the landing with her like broken ankle. Michael Johnson had the golden shoes. I just loved sports and the Olympics. And like, I remember that so viscerally being like, oh yeah, like when I grow up, like I want to go to the Olympics. I didn't have a specific sport in mind, but again, like that's when snowboarding sort of made its way in. My pathway, again, the Voodoo Jib Fest used to come to Bromley. I would do the one contest a year. And through fortune, one season, it was the only slopestyle contest in a series and I won it. And so I got an invite to go to nationals and it just like, dumb luck. And so it's like, fortunately that year, nationals were in Waterville, New Hampshire. And my parents were like, yeah, we can drive there for the weekend. We'll go and check this out. And it went well. I got third and actually stood on that podium with two legends in snowboarding. Pat Moore won.
Yeah.
And Jake Blauvelt was second. I got third and met some coaches. And that's when like the recruiting started. They asked me if I was interested in going to Stratton Mountain School. And I mean, it was all just like dumb luck. Like I won one slopestyle contest that was at my home mountain and it got me an invite to go to nationals. And just the domino effect from that is just, I feel lucky.
Yeah, so that all works out. And you're talking about the Olympics and how they were really awesome for you when you were growing up and you like watching them. But at the same time, the X Games is exploding as well. And you had snowboarding. Were you into that X Games as well? Or were the Olympics still more important to you?
For sure, I was into the X Games because I remember like Tony Hawk, like the summer X Games, like watching the BMX on TV and seeing all that stuff. Like the X Games was so rad. And then figuring out that it had, during the wintertime, I watched a lot less TV because when I had free time, we were snowboarding. Yes, I remember like growing up watching the summer X Games with like Street Luge and the winter X Games like Sean Palmer and Shannon Dunn and seeing all that sort of stuff. Just being like amazed at what was on TV and like what I loved to do and being able to see the best in the world do it.
Seeing the best in the world do it and thinking about where you are. Burton is right down the street when you're talking about being in Vermont. And were you ever able to go as like a spectator to the US Open and see like professional snowboarding in person and have your mind blown?
Interestingly, it wasn't a family affair and it wasn't like a big thing. The US Open was right down the street. Like I ended up going to Stratton for high school. I don't ever remember going just as a spectator because actually X Games was at Mount Snow, which is also right down the road in Vermont.
Yeah.
Like easy drive. But I think that like as a kid, like when that all was happening, like I was more interested in just going out and riding myself. I don't want to waste a weekend to go watch someone else compete when I had an opportunity to just go out and ride myself. Because thinking about the US Open, like the first time I really remember it was when I went to compete. The way that the Open used to work in Vermont, they had pre-qualifiers. Like anyone could sign up and you could try and like make it into the show. And it didn't work out, but I was there and competing and sticking around. And then like watching that as a high school athlete, like my mind being so blown by Ross Powers and Danny Cass and Kazuhiro Kakubo was there. Like,
was it your first time seeing it at that level? Like dudes boosting 12 feet out of the pipe and you're just like, holy shit, that's what it's supposed to look like.
I mean, I had seen it in person because I had started competing at professional events. So I was like sitting there watching. The thing about the US Open that's so special is like the culture that surrounds it and like the atmosphere and the amount of people that show up to watch, like hiking up the side of the pipe with the thing lined on all sides. And you know, there's like 10,000 spectators over there at Stratton, like more people than I had ever seen. And that was what like blew my mind. My first US Open was like seeing that level of energy and excitement around. And then what it did to the riders, the tricks that people were doing and just the energy, like it just blew me away. And also my life was already snowboarding at that point. So it was sort of like, whoa, I guess this is a reason to work harder and try and get better.
And when you think about working harder, I mean, you're in a world where you're among so many elite athletes. And I would think that most of them are born with just God-given natural talent that makes them born better than a lot of people. And then it's kind of how they harness that talent and how hard they work to be able to harness that and get themselves in a position for greatness. And with you, were you born with a shit ton of natural given talent, or have you always had to outwork people? Like, have you kind of been able to look at your career now and realize that, no, because you seem like one of those people with a work ethic, like from day one, like you were riding a road bike when people were making fun of people riding road bikes. Like you were always into those endurance sports before they were cool. And like, how would that impact you?
I think obviously with the gift of hindsight, I was born with a lot of talent. I think I'm very fortunate that I have general athletic skills. Like I would say I'm a jack of all trades, right? Like I played tennis. I have good hand-eye coordination. I grew up skateboarding, but I was never really that good at any of them. I loved basketball. I loved all of it. Like I can pick up a lot of things really, really easily. But as soon as I need to like be good at them or want to be good at them, it took a ton of work. I think the reason that I achieved the success that I had in the long term in my career is because of my work ethic. Like I love to work hard. I love to train. I love to like put the axe to the grindstone, but I don't think I would have gotten there if I wasn't gifted with hand-eye coordination. And I want to say that with like gratitude. I feel very lucky that I was born with the natural skills that I had, but I certainly wouldn't have gotten to where I did without the work ethic. It's funny because as a teenager, when I was a kid, like, first of all, you never fit in. Like everyone's super self-conscious. Like I did not fit in the snowboard crowd in high school because I liked working out. You know, I didn't have long hair. Like the clothes that I wore was all wrong. And I think I grew up in those like high school years with this giant chip on my shoulder.
Because you were looked at as a jock? Because you went to school with Louis Vito and you went with Danny Davis and you went with like some cool ass snowboarders. And given Louis Vito works his ass off, probably works as hard as you do these days in just trying to make himself look great. But back then, were they all clowning you for like your work ethic and how you weren't a real snowboarder because of how you did stuff like a skier almost?
100%. Yes. I went to Stratton Mountain School with like a legendary, I got so lucky. Louis, Danny Davis, Tyler Emond, Nate Farrell, Kevin Pierce, Lindsay Jacobellis, so many ridiculously good snowboarders. And I never fit in with them. I remember after we graduated high school a few years later, I was like on the US team and I like bumped into Louise somewhere and he was so nice to me and it caught me off guard because we had friction through high school. Like you're shitheads when you're teenagers and we always argued. And yes, like I was a jock in high school. I played soccer. I played lacrosse at Stratton Mountain School. Like, I liked those things. And at the time, I didn't really understand it. But looking back, and even now, I still love going to the gym. I liked going to the gym then because it makes me feel good. And then I was self-conscious about it. Nowadays, like people can think whatever they want. Like I go to the gym to like live an active lifestyle and try and stay healthy and do all the things that I love to do as I get closer to 40. But back then, like working out makes you feel good. I didn't know that as a teenager, but I was a jock because working out gave me endorphins and it made me feel good. And I liked doing those. So road bike, you mentioned road biking. Like I started riding a road bike in the dumb Lycra skinny stuff when I was in high school. Certainly got made fun of for it. I still do that now. Like I love mountain biking. I wear baggies, but like I go and ride my road bike because it makes me feel good. And I think it all sort of ties into that work ethic. I like working hard. I like dedicating myself to things. And just like anything else, like I got into bikes. And so I started riding real hard. I got into mountain biking. I started racing those because I liked working hard. And I think it's a combination of having some natural athletic talent and then like the way that I'm wired as like, yeah, like I'm not scared to go and work hard. Like I'll go and put the axe to the grindstone and do whatever it takes.
And, with that jock label that you had, or we kind of say, I mean, obviously, we can say whatever we want to do it. But back then, Nick Baumgartner had that same kind of thing. He had that kind of jock label, but he was a little bit different, like the loud, boisterous, out there in your face. Like he didn't give a fuck what you thought because he was just who he was. But did it almost bother you as a high school kid? Because even though you're with all these elite athletes, you still have all the same problems that a normal high school kid has in just terms of self-confidence and all that shit.
I mean, let's be honest. Baumgartner is still like that.
Yeah.
Like I saw him at a World Cup last week and he is still the boisterous, loud, obnoxious jock. He came into snowboarding a different way. And like, certainly he was my teammate for 20 years. Like we certainly had our friction. And again, with maturity, I just like look at what he's doing now and I just have a ton of respect. Did it annoy the shit out of me? Like absolutely. And I'm sure the stuff that I did annoyed him too. Like you're so trapped in your own like self perspective that it's easy to like forget that other people see you a different way or whatever it is. The first time I raced Baumgartner was at USASA Nationals in Angel Fire, New Mexico in 2004. And we raced boardercross and he beat me to the finish line by, we'll call it 3 feet. And again, I'm this tall but scrawny snowboarder from Vermont. He's 5 years older than me. So he would have been like 22, 23 years old, like filled out, big, and like, again, naturally athletic. And he beat me to the finish line. The reason that story sticks out to me is because I got second place at Nationals, Baumgartner got an invite to the X Games the next year, and I didn't. And I got a call from this is how it used to work back then. I got a call from ESPN. They're like, hey, we got to do all this info. You're coming to the X Games. Again, I was 18 years old. I had just moved out of the house. I'm living on my own. And I'm like, oh my God, this is the coolest thing in the world. Do this whole intake, interview questions. And then they called me back like 2 weeks later and they were like, hey, actually, we made a mistake and you don't actually have a start in the X Games. Like that same year, I got fourth at like the Grand Prix in Mammoth and Nate Holland won. Seth Westcott was second. This guy, Mike Brumbaugh, he was third and he got an X Games invite and they thought he had one from somewhere else and they thought Baumgartner might have. And they were like, we made a mistake. And it lit a fire under my ass. I was so pissed off, like so heartbroken, so bummed. And I found out that there was like a way back then, 2004, 2005, they did the Jabra X Jam. The winner got to go to the X Games. And so I found out about this event. It was in North Lake Tahoe. I signed up, I went there and I won the damn thing and punched my ticket. And the woman called me back. She was like, hey, so me again, nice work getting it done. We've already done your intake. So we have all your information. We'll see you in Aspen. And you look back at it all, it's how it's all so intertwined and super lucky. But yeah, like running into Baumgartner when I was in high school, like being again, whatever, like I still am a dorky snowboarder. I don't give a shit what people think. I love snowboarding.
It's time for my first sponsor break, and I'm going to start things out with Elan Skis. And while I could tell you all about the new award-winning Ripstick ski models or the award-winning Playmaker twin tip line, and then push you to demo them at your local shop because they're going to make you have more fun on the mountain, I'm just going to talk about your local shop. There's something special about stepping into your local ski shop. The smell of the freshly waxed skis, discussions about where to find the best skiing, what the shop kids like skiing on best, what they think the best products are, and that expert advice makes these shops more than just a great place to buy gear. Elan believes that ski shops are the soul of skiing, a place where skiers come together for genuine human connection, and that can't be replaced online. And I agree with them. I mean, going to a ski shop is an experience where you connect with a like-minded person who, in a short conversation, understands what you want to do and sets you up with the right gear so you can have as much fun as possible. Shops are among the last authentic pieces of ski community that we have left. So please buy your ski gear from your local ski shop. You can find a list of Elan dealers nationwide over at elanskis.com. My final sponsor this round is Stanley. It's hard to be known for both being that green bottle that kept your grandpa's coffee hot and being the most popular product in pop culture. But that's what Stanley is these days, and that's what you get when you mix in the quality that Stanley has been known for since they pretty much created the category of keeping drinks piping hot and ice cold in 1913. And lately, over 100 years later, that quality, combined with some incredible colorways, partnerships, collaboration, and events, has made Stanley bigger than ever before. And while they're creating some game-changing marketing, working with people like Olivia Rodrigo and Messi, are you kidding me? That's so cool. But what I love is how functional Stanley's products are. I personally use a Stanley pint glass every single day, and I swear by them. And my wife and so many others out there can't live without their Stanley quenchers. I mean, Stanley makes a product for everyone, and now everyone can get Stanley's incredible products in a colorway that totally suits their style, like my new Miami Vice colored pint glasses. I love my Stanley stuff, and I want you to love Stanley too. And I bet you didn't know that Stanley offers Powell Movement listeners their biggest discount that they make available to the public. That's right. I'm going to save you 30% on all of your Stanley products. Here's what you need to do. Go to stanley1913.com, go shopping, and at checkout, enter the code POWELL2025. That's a capital P and then the numbers 2025 with no spaces in there, and you're going to save that 30%. Those are my sponsors. Now let's jump back into the podcast. Snowboarding is like high school. I mean, if you're in the snowboard industry, there's many different factions, and your faction happens to be, I don't want to say the least cool because there are hard booters out there and stuff like that, but it's like slope style, half pipe, big air dudes. They get all the press, all the magazine covers, all the interviews. No one's ever going to use you guys in ads or anything like that because you sell like 12 boards a year, and that's okay because what you do is so specialized. All of these things have to put a chip on your shoulder between the people not thinking you're cool, people thinking that you're a jock, to like people not sponsoring you because you're not in the cool segment of snowboarding. Did all of that stuff put a chip on your shoulder from pretty much day one?
Yes. It all sort of started in high school. The fact that I didn't carry the stereotypical snowboarder image of whatever it was back then, like
the cloud of smoke.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I was in high school, whatever. Sure. Like I wasn't long, shaggy hair, baggy clothes, whatever. And the irony when I think about it now is that I was like excluded from being in the cool kids group because I didn't look and act like everybody else. And the whole idea and foundation of snowboarding was like being counterculture. We didn't want to be part of the prim and proper ski community. And the funny part is that like, because I wasn't like everyone else in a sport that already was counterculture and different, then I was excluded again. And when you think about it on the broader perspective, it was ass backwards. Yeah, man, I'm doing this like the way that I want to do it. Like I fucking love snowboarding. I'm out here trying as hard as I can. It's not like I wasn't good enough or didn't care as much, but like, because I didn't like fit that image, I wasn't included. And so, yeah, like that always built a chip on my shoulder. And then, yes, like moving over to like, I was a pipe jock through high school. Like half pipe was my thing. Like that was what I focused on. Again, back to the like jack of all trades. I just happened to be good at boardercross and did well in an event. And I did all, I competed in every discipline in high school. I did the hard boot thing. I competed in slopestyle a ton, but through most of my high school years, I was a pipe jock. Like I wanted to go to the Olympics for half pipe. That was what I focused on. I worked on all that stuff. Again, like competing against Louis Vito and Danny Davis and that whole crew. I did a pro level boardercross event, got fourth because I'm good at snowboarding. And I'm like, oh, I could do this boardercross thing. Like, yeah, I guess I'll chase that rabbit down the hole. And again, in hindsight, my first year out of high school, I still tried to go do some pipe events, but I didn't have coaching or I didn't know how to train, whatever it was. And I fell off the map pretty quick.
But your life timed perfectly for boardercross.
Yes, I got real lucky.
First, you were about to go to college. You're going to go to UVM and you're all set to do that. And it's like you're going to not give up snowboarding, but you're going to live a regular life like a regular college kid. You're going to go to school. You'll probably compete here and there. But the dream is not essentially over, but it's dying. And then 2 weeks later, you get a bid to the U.S. team and you're like on the B team. And that changes everything in life, right?
Again, like just the way my life panned out was just a lot of luck and fortune. And yeah, I had applied to a lot of elite schools. I applied to Northwestern and Babson College and BC, and UVM was the only school I got into. I got waitlisted at Yale. Yale was like, again, like I was born in Yale Hospital. My mom worked at the Yale Hospital. That was like, oh yeah, if I'm going to go to college, I got waitlisted there. And if I had gotten in, I probably would have given up snowboarding and gone. And luckily, I wasn't smart enough or rich enough or good enough to get into Yale. And I got a letter in the mail. I wish I still had it, being like, hey, you're on the US snowboard team for snowboard cross. Congratulations. I'm like, cool. I guess I'm going to go and do this. And again, like hindsight, like I was able to have a really long career in boardercross because you don't really like reach your prime, generally speaking, until you're like mid to late 20s. Whereas like you look at half pipe and a lot of those kids are like 16, 17, 18 years old and the best in the world. Again, like makes me have a lot of respect for Louis. Louis is still out there grinding, like doing tricks where some of his competitors are 15 years younger than him. And he's worked his ass off. Again, like hard work is able to like keep his career going. But yeah, I got invited to go do boardcross and it was like so loose back then. Like the way I work in the industry now, like everything is like, oh, you have to do this event and qualify here and do this. And this is the pathway. And it's like very cut and dry. Like, no, man, I like went to a Grand Prix in Mammoth, got fourth. My coach at the time was like, hey, you just scored some good points. You should probably go do another boardercross. Like went and did another one, won it, got named to the US snowboard team. And it's like, all right, I guess I'll go and do boardercross now. And I love snowboarding and just chase that rabbit. Like, again, I'm like, all right, boardercross is sweet. I seem to be pretty good at it. Guess I'll see where this can take me.
And you say it's like an older man's game. When you think about it compared to halfpipe, other than the people like Louis and the Scotty Jameses, who are definitely incredible. But halfpipe, a lot of it is balls to try those tricks. You get to be about 25, 26 years old. Something changes, I think, in the human body where you're almost afraid of getting hurt. Like those guys could get hurt, given some of those guys are able to push it even further. But for you, by the time you get to be 25, 26, that's when you're actually getting all the knowledge that you need to win races. Like everybody's got God-given talent. Everybody's got a work ethic to some extent. But it's the experience that separates you at 18, 19 years old, not being able to make the Torino team because you just don't have the experience at like a 27-year-old who might not be as talented as you, but they have more knowledge than you. They're going to win almost every time because of the little secrets. Would that be fair to say?
100%. Like the biggest challenge in boardercross is to be really good, you have to build experience. And it's impossible to build experience when you're not in a bib. You can go out and train and do as many like practice runs and whatever you want. But like at the highest level, you have to be able to make decisions before you have time to think about them. And the only way you build those reps is just racing over time. Just like anything, there are always outliers. There are going to be a few people that manage to like reach that peak at a younger age. I wasn't one of them. But yeah, it took me 5 years on the World Cup before I got my first podium. And looking back, it was so loose. We were in Mammoth in 2005, competing against each other as teammates for, we call it the Wolf Pack. It's just the athletes there at this training camp trying to get the last World Cup spot to go and qualify for the Torino games. And we did like a couple GS runs. We did some stuff over some park jumps. We did cat and mouse games. It was so loose. And yeah, I'm like this like young 19-year-old kid that had like very little race experience. I got the invite to be there, but the older dudes there, like Jason Smith and God, trying to think about who just like put me in a body bag. They're like, yeah, nice try, kid. I'll take that.
This was the first U.S. snowboard team that you made. I mean,
yeah, inaugural first time boardercross had been part of the U.S. snowboard team. I was I was like the punk little kid that, you know, Nate Holland, Seth Westcott, Lindsay, Marnie Yamada, like these people had been like racing at a higher level for a long time. And I was just the sort of teenager kid that could snowboard well and got to come along and didn't really fit in. And yeah, didn't even sniff a chance at trying to go to Torino, but it set the fire. Like it lit a fire under my ass. I'm like, this is something I can do. This is what I want. And helped me continue to work hard and didn't even really try and qualify for 2006. Remember watching Seth win. Remember watching Lindsay fall, unfortunately, and get second. Lindsay had been my high school classmate, high school girlfriend 2 years prior. I'm like watching all of this. I'm like, oh no, like I can go and do that. And then in 2010, the Vancouver games, I went to a World Cup. I like met Olympic criteria to have like a top 30 in the world or something like that. And my coach, he pulled me aside and he's like, hey, I want you to come be the wax tech. And I'm like, well, I want to qualify. And he's like, well, you don't have a World Cup start at the next 2 events. So come and be a tech for us. And again, like total grunt work, was the wax tech, got to go to the Olympics, and I got a backstage pass. Like I got to go to the games and see the bright lights and the amazing, like, it's like to be there in person and to be behind the scenes. It shows you a side of things that a lot of people don't get to see. And like, God damn, did that really light a fire under my ass when I actually buckled down and started training in the gym like a madman and taking my training on the hill more seriously. And a year later, got my first World Cup podium. And I think that my success later was because of that trip to Vancouver. Like as a wax tech, like being on the hill, seeing the way that it works, talking to my teammate, Seth, after watching him win his second gold medal and hearing him talk to me about, he's like, hey man, there's bright lights here, but it's just another snowboard race. It's the same thing we do all the time. And that's what helped me focus moving forward.
But that one seems like it's the agony of defeat and then the thrill of victory, because yes, you get to have that experience with nothing on your shoulders of having to perform. But you spent 5 years traveling the world, spending all of your own money for the most part. I'm sure there was, stipends here and there, but you're spending a shit ton of your own money. It's not like you're independently wealthy, so you have to work to make all this stuff happen. And you fall short of your goal and your dream that you've let everyone in the world know. It's like every single person that ever has met you knows you as like Alex, the snowboarder who's trying to make the Olympic team in Vancouver. And is it almost embarrassing when you don't make it and you have to tell people like, no, I didn't make it, I'm not on the team?
I don't think it was embarrassing. I think that I was like maybe young and ignorant enough. Like I was 22, 23 years old. You look at my peers, like they're just graduating college, getting internships. Like I'm traveling the world, competing on the U.S. snowboard team. Just because I wasn't good and didn't have a bunch of sponsors, like I was in the X Games every year. Like I had made TV time. I don't remember it being embarrassing. I remember it being frustrating. I remember it being like heartbreaking and disappointing.
Well, I would think frustrating first and foremost is you spent, 10 to 15 years traveling the world, like we said, going to all these races, hundreds of races that you've been to. You've had 7 podiums, I think, or something like that. That's got to be frustrating. Going places 30 times a year and not being able to stand on or even get in the top 10 most of the time. And you're like an elite athlete. I would think that's frustrating. And then not making the team's heartbreaking.
Yeah, it's frustrating. It's heartbreaking. Again, the point you said before is like very true. And it's different and making the snowboard industry even harder nowadays. Like I did it on my own. Like my parents paid for my car insurance and my health insurance. And that was it. My phone bill, the rest of my rent, all of my travel. Like for years, I was on the U.S. snowboard team and I would rack up like between $10,000 and $20,000 in credit card debt every year. Season would end, I'd get a job, I'd bust my ass, tons of different jobs. Like right out of high school, I moved to Mammoth, then I like moved back home to live at home, and like I worked as a bellman at a hotel, making really good money in tips. As I got older, again, I was like a whitewater raft guide living in a tent. That was maybe not great for my snowboard career or my financial scenario, but right. To make real money, yeah, I was like a project manager for a storm restoration company. Like that was tough work. It sucked. And I was grinding to try and make enough money to pay off my debt and then put away money for the next season. I just lived on credit card debt for years. And is it frustrating? Sure. But I didn't have any doubts about it. Yes. When I was real young, like I remember an ex-girlfriend of mine, like her parents being like, oh, like you're not going to go to college. What are you doing with your life? I'm like, yo, I'm on the US snowboard. I'm on the national team. Like I'm traveling the world, competing in the highest level of competition. Like, did I know that when I was 18, 19 years old? No, I didn't know how to have those conversations with those people. But like looking at it in hindsight, like, yeah, I'm like really proud of all the sacrifice I put in. And I loved to compete. I loved to snowboard. And so the grind, I don't remember ever wavering. I don't ever remember being like, great, I got an 8th place finish. Like, here's $400. And I'm like, nope, I'm going to give it up and try something else. It was what I wanted to do. I loved it. I loved snowboarding. I loved competing. And so I had blinders on, like horses wear those like blinders on the, like on the side of their eye. I just had blinders on and I'm like, no, like this is what I want to do. And so I'm just going to bust my ass to make that dream happen.
And when you think about it, outside of the Olympics and outside of the X Games, what was the event that you did best at in your entire career?
I mean, I got 4th at X Games once. Like that's a bitter pill to swallow.
Yeah. Well, I wanted to ask you about that because how many times did you go to X Games?
I can't remember. I would guess I competed in X Games every year from 2005 until they stopped inviting boardercross in 2016. So 10 years at the X Games, maybe. Like I never really did that well there. I got 4th once. We raced heats of 6, so I made it into small finals, like top 12 a couple times. I think thinking about the events that I did well at on the World Cup, yeah, I had 6 individual podiums. I had another 4 or 5 like team podiums there, like 10 World Cup podiums. It's something that I'm proud of now. Thinking about an event that I did well at, like in hindsight, I did well on the boardercross tracks that were big and gnarly and scary and dangerous or challenging and technical. My first podium was at Sochi, Russia in 2012 at the World Cup. I got 2nd there. That course, it took people a day before they could make it from the top to the bottom.
Was that the test event for it?
Yeah, it was the test event. Yep. That was my first World Cup podium. And yeah, I just generally speaking did better at the bigger, gnarlier, more challenging courses.
It's time for my second round of sponsors, and this time I'm starting out with Outdoor Research. I've been using OR products since I moved to Seattle almost 25 years ago because they outperform everything on the market. I mean, they build products to perform in the miserable weather that the Pacific Northwest can be known for. And when you live here, you need to have best-in-class gear, and that's what OR has always delivered. From building industry-leading gear for mountaineers, which are still best in class, to the mittens that every snowboarder wore in the 90s, which are making a comeback in a big way, to the new styles, cuts, fits, and kits that they've developed with the help of their incredible athlete roster that includes world champion Troy Podmilsack, freeski legend Mark Abma, and X Games gold medalist Zoe Atkin, just to name a few. While OR has always been building the best products to outperform everything else in brutal wet weather, the recent focus on style is what has not only me, but my kid and his friends all wanting to wear OR gear. Because now, it looks as good as it performs, and that's a bold statement. But don't take it from me. Head on over to OutdoorResearch.com, check out the products, buy yourself something, and stay drier and warmer than ever before. My final sponsor is Best Day Brewing. And if you haven't heard of Best Day, they are hands down the best tasting NA beer on the market. I enjoy Best Day for so many reasons. The flavor is the most important. I swear by the hazy IPA, the Kolsch, and the Electro Lime. The beauty of Best Day is that it really tastes as good or better than an alcoholic beer. I mean, in a blind taste test, if I put an Electro Lime against any Mexican beer, 9 out of 10 times, my friends are going to pick the Electro Lime because they like it better. And you can drink a few of them at the bar or in the parking lot after skiing, and you don't have to worry about driving or making bad decisions. Really, I haven't quit drinking. When I go to the bar to have beers, I always mix in a few Best Days with the leaded stuff, so I can be more functional throughout the night, and an added benefit that I didn't expect was it makes me last twice as long. I mean, I can stay till closing time. I don't know what you were thinking, but if you want to have your best day or night ever, or just want to enjoy a few cold ones anywhere, grab a Best Day and you can forget about the calories, forget about the alcohol, and forget about getting in trouble on the way home. To see all the flavors and order some beer, head on over to bestday.com, and if you're flying on Alaska, you can enjoy a Best Day Kolsch at 30,000 feet. Those are my sponsors. Now let's jump back into the podcast. When you come in a year before, and it's like a new course, I would think, and everybody's kind of experiencing it for the first time, and you go in and you kick ass, and it's your first time ever really kicking ass. You're second on the podium, which is like huge for you. I mean, Are you like supremely confident in that course? Like, bring me back to Russia. I've got that one. That one's made for me.
No, definitely not. I liked the course. I clearly rode well there. Boardercross tracks are all shaped by humans. They're different even when you repeat year after year at the same venue. That's what's so impressive. You know, like Nate Holland just had a stranglehold on the X Games in Aspen. Like, I don't know how he did that 6 years in a row. Like, so amazingly impressed by that. But for me, I'm like, no, I got it. Like, I deserve to be here. Like, it was a huge deal to finally get my first World Cup podium. And I deserve to be here. I deserve to be at this level. And like, I know that I have what it takes. And it just kept me grinding. It kept me motivated and working hard. And even then, like, even still after I was on the World Cup podium, I didn't have full funding. I was still spending my own money to travel and compete on the World Cup. And it was just like, how can I figure this out? Can I find a cheaper plane ticket? Can I go here and do this differently? Or can I drive to an event?
So for some people, it's all taken care of and everything's super easy. But in every step of your career, there's always been this extra hurdle, whether it's been not being accepted or having to fund this or do that, where no one's ever made it easy for you.
No, I don't think so. I mean, I just want to be careful in saying that, though. Like, yes, I dealt with real struggles. Was I ever worried I was going to be like homeless? No.
I mean, we're talking about snowboard traveling the world problems. I mean, you're not starving.
Yeah. But yeah, there were always hurdles in front of me. I remember when I was young, like in my like early 20s, trying to make it on the World Cup and get that first podium and do all of that. I'm like, yo, I can't train the same way that these other guys can. Like, I have to have a job all summer. I have to work all of the time. I can't go to the gym. I can't go on these like training camp trips because I have a job and I have to pay bills. And I remember being bitter, maybe ignorant, being like, man, if I had big sponsorship dollars, this would be so easy. And, you know, that's a load of shit as well. Like, certainly when you remove barriers and you can focus, like, yeah, it makes your life a lot easier and it makes it better to be a supreme athlete and like focused. But also it builds character and it gives me a lot of other life skills that I'm grateful for at this point. And yes, I think it would have been easier had things been different. And in reality, the reason that I was able to make my career happen in those real scrappy, lean years was my aunt and uncle. They were the ones that owned the ski house that my parents got to go and stay at so I could learn to ski and snowboard, right? Like, they were the ones that owned a second home so that I could go and learn to snowboard and ride. Like, my parents couldn't afford a second home. And when I got a little bit older, I ended up moving in with their sons, my cousins, and they bought a place for them to live. And our rent was super cheap. Like, all we had to do was cover expenses. And that allowed me to work a little bit less and put more of my dollars towards snowboarding. So again, like, huge gratitude. My parents didn't have a blank checkbook to like support my career, but my family had opportunities for me to save money other places so that I could put it towards snowboarding. And I think that you just have to look back and be like, if they hadn't done that, I don't know how my career would have progressed. I know that I still worked my ass off. I still had a job. I still had jobs. I still like trained in the gym and worked really hard and did all of the things. But if I hadn't had those barriers, would I have turned out the same? I don't know. Like, I don't know how things would have panned out if it had been like blank checkbook. Yeah, go ahead and snowboard and do whatever you want from mom and dad. And there are certainly people that have had access to that.
And you saw it everywhere. I mean, I would think 50% of the people that you saw had that experience of like everything was handed to them and it was up to them to have the great work ethic. And a lot of them to get to the level that you guys are at have that.
And it didn't pan out to the highest level for a lot of them. They got to be in the ring, but they never got to stand on the podium. They had a lot of like great opportunities. And certainly I'm jealous of some of their situations, but did they never reach their true potential because so much was handed to them at a certain age? Maybe. Thinking about all of the barriers that were in place for me helped me like overcome a lot of those challenges and keep working and keep getting all of those results. And I've never thought about it that way. But when you ask that question, I think about it now, like maybe that's a big reason for like where my success came from is like I did have a number of barriers that I had to overcome, had to figure it out, and then made it happen.
Yeah, it was never easy for you, but your second World Cup podium is really like the big one that like kind of starts the whole chain of events that really changes your life. It's Lake Louise 2013. I think you get second place. And that is one where, I mean, there's still a few more races left, but you meet the Olympic criteria there. And if everything ends right there, you are going to be an Olympian for life. Like, can you describe the emotions of that?
That podium right there, like the Lake Louise podium was, oh my God. Like I remember going home for Christmas after that event and being like, I've done it. I've like punched my ticket. It's not official, but I've met Olympic criteria. Like the Olympic season rolls around, those qualifying events, the way the pressure builds crushes people. You see people that are like more talented that can't handle the pressure. Again, thinking about like that podium was easy for me. It wasn't like you hear about flow state and I didn't do anything special. I showed up, I snowboarded well, I did what I knew I could do, and it worked out for me that day.
Well, there's no pressure on you. Nobody thinks you're going to podium. It's like you're lucky to make the team almost. Not in your mind, but I would think to like journalists and people outside, they're like, oh, who's this guy? And yeah, he's lucky to be on this team.
Absolutely, like 100%. There was no external pressure for me to get it done there. You're like exactly right there. Like he's not Seth Westcott. He's not Nate Holland.
Dude, you have 2 podiums in your life. Who thinks you're going to podium at the Olympics?
No one did. I gave a talk at the U.S. Olympic Committee. They gave a presentation about the way that the medals panned out. And there's expected, Shaun White, Michaela Schifrin, Lindsey Vonn. There's likely, like these people stand a chance. Maybe it'll happen, maybe it won't. And then there's unlikely. And my name was under unlikely. Like no one was expecting me to podium there. And whatever, I'm the one with the necklace. It worked out for me. Again, even thinking back, the point of like that podium, Lake Louise, I went home for Christmas, got to see all my family. I remember my uncle giving me a hug and tearing up. And he's like the stoic, hard ass, tough guy of my childhood. And he's like, we're so fucking proud of you. And seeing that in him made me realize the way that my family was invested in my success. And yeah, got that podium. And like, it wasn't done, you know, in 2010, Ross Powers and Sean Palmer both had podiums in the Olympic qualifying events and did not get to go to those games. And so I definitely didn't let my guard down and was still working my ass off. Like, it's not official yet. You got to keep going. Just remember like the weight off my shoulders at the last Olympic qualifying event. It was in Andorra, and just teammates crossed the finish line. Like we were done. And it was like, fuck yes. Like this is official. Like you're going to the games. And it was like a weight lifted off my shoulders of lifetime of desire and self expectations and dreaming. And it was, yeah, God, that that's as good a drug as they make right there.
I mean, in the final, you're in third place for most of the race, and you get taken over towards the end, and it looks bleak, man. And then coming into the second to last turn, you make a move, and you end up stealing the bronze from him, it seems like. I mean, was that like a calculated move, or is that all muscle memory that takes over? Does everything happen so fast in the moment? What do you remember from that, where you're losing to you stealing a medal? Not stealing a medal, but you earned it, but, you know, like you had to come from behind.
Yeah, I mean, it makes watching it on TV a lot more exciting. I remember getting to be in finals and just being grateful. Just like, this is what you have worked your whole life for. Like, let's go and get it done. And the way that I achieved success in those years was hyper focusing on the things that I had control of. Boardercross, you're racing against either 3 or 5 other dudes. There are a lot of things that you don't have control over. And I remember trying to pull it in the start gate, like focus on your body position. Think about like your vision. Think about the things that you have 100% control over. Had a great start. I was in third. Paul Henry passes me like right in the middle. And I remember being on course thinking like, oh, fuck. I think that was like all my brain had time to register for, like, oh, fuck, like you're in fourth. The way I passed him, again, like just executing my snowboarding, sticking to my lines. He made a tiny little mistake on this like real challenging jump. He's like opens the door, like he takes the turn a little bit wider. And I'm like, sweet, man, I'm going inside. Thanks very much. Passed him easily, like well. And I remember it was like the second to last turn, made it through the last turn. And you come into this like big finish line jump that people had crashed on. Trevor, my teammate, botched that jump in semis. And I remember coming into that finish line jump, just thinking, just stay on your fucking feet, stay on your feet, stay on your feet. There's kind of this unspoken rule in boardercross that you never really claim the finish line unless you win. Like the winner's the only one that gets to like hoist their hands up and be excited. And I remember crossing the finish line in third place, putting my arms out and like screaming and yelling. And, like the unspoken rules can fuck off for all I care. Like I just won a medal at the Olympics. God damn, I'm going to celebrate it.
For sure. And then you get tackled by all your teammates on the snow. And it's like the feel good moment of that day at the Olympics, which is so awesome. And when you think about that, I think you're married and you have a kid, right?
I do. Yeah. Have a daughter.
So we'll say those are 2 of your top 5 moments in life is married, have a kid. You have to say that or else you get in trouble. Then I would think that Sochi, when being tackled by those guys, that's got to be one of those top 5 moments in your life as well. What are the other 2 top 5 moments that you got?
Oh, God, that's a good question. Top 5 moments of my life. Maybe not singular moment, but like experience. Going down the Grand Canyon. Like I went down the Grand Canyon on like a whitewater raft trip. That's not like crossing the finish line sort of thing, but like the way that it impacted my life, like going down the Grand Canyon on a private raft trip with a bunch of strangers and my neighbor. Oh my God. One of the more amazing things I've ever done. And then I'd say like the other top 5 moment was because of that medal, throwing out a pitch at Fenway. Like I grew up, my grandfather was like a very important figure in my life. I grew up in Connecticut, which sort of split territory between Red Sox and Yankees. And my grandfather was like a diehard Red Sox fan. I just grew up. I was a Red Sox fan. That was my thing. And getting to go on the field and throw out that first pitch, man, that's as cool as it gets right there.
For sure. And I've always been a believer that a gold medalist, if they have some charisma and hustle, they can make a career out of that gold. They can Johnny Mosley it, go talk everywhere, and they can get paid. But a bronze medalist, what kind of opportunities are there after like the first 3 or 4 months after the Olympics?
Certainly, it's certainly a different game, right? Like, and people can make careers out of their silver medal or their bronze medal or whatever it is. There's a lot of hustle and charm and charisma and connections. I got to do a ton of cool stuff. Again, like dropping the puck for the Bruins and throwing out the pitch, that puts you on people's radar. I didn't know how to hustle like the speaking engagement tour the way that I wish that I had. But like still to this day, every once in a while I'll get invited to like go do a appearance here or go do an appearance there. I remember that summer. So this would have been like months later. Like I get an email from some company being like, will you come do an appearance at our event? And I like did research. I'm like, who is this company? And I'm like, they're like, how much money do you want? I'm like, well, what are you thinking? And they're like, this is the number we're talking about. And I was like, I doubled it. And they're like, okay. Like they paid me $5,000 to come like stand at their booth and sign autographs and like talk for a few minutes.
Like bring the medal and we're good?
Yeah, pretty much. And I certainly did as many of those. I spoke for Goldman Sachs and I can't find the footage anywhere. This was maybe a few years later. I was a celebrity judge on Master Chef Junior. Weird shit like that. That was a fun one. Still never seen that episode. Friends of mine have seen it. They'll like text me and they're like, I just saw you on this. There's a lot of really unique, cool opportunities. Maybe I'd say 6th in that. And like this didn't have anything to do with it. winning a medal, but it did have to do with like being Olympian. It's like shaking hands with the president, meeting Obama and shaking his hand. Like, damn, that is a real cool opportunity.
Yeah. That's pretty amazing.
But one of the cool things I did with my medal, again, not paid, but I did a bunch of military visits. I did that in like maybe summer 2014, maybe 2015. I can't remember now. That was cool. That like seriously impacted my life. Like I'm there as the quote celebrity to like service members. And I remember leaving that experience being like, this is just as cool for me as it is for them.
No, that's pretty rad, man. And so after every Olympics, or, you don't make the team every year, you make it 1 year. So after that 1 year that you make it and you have all that shit going on afterwards, is there like a post-Olympic hangover where it's like nobody wants you anymore and you kind of like, I wouldn't say go into a depression, but it's like the funk of not being wanted by people?
Yes, there is for sure. Like you win a medal at the Olympics. For me, that was the highest I'd ever been in my entire life. There's only one place to go from there, and that's down. Mine kind of happened by accident. Like it was pretty close to after the games. I was at the US Open in Vail, sort of on this celebration tour. I was poaching the half pipe and I crashed poaching the pipe and hit my head and got kind of like a minor concussion. And the doc's like, you're not competing for the rest of the season. He's like, you just won a medal at the Olympics. Like, you don't need to go race any more World Cups. He's like, why don't you just stay home and celebrate? And like sort of canceled the rest of my plans. And that was like the first time in my life that I like ever felt depression, because I was like, well, fuck, I just have to like sit at home and do what? Go back to normal life? And then things start to pick up again, right? You get invited to go do all these cool things like after the fact, but there's a real post-Olympic come down because I think people are talking about more now. People are much more like open about sort of
mental health now.
Mental health, exactly. But then I was still committed to snowboarding. And so like, yeah, there's a come down like months later of like, okay, like time to buckle back down and like start prepping for the next season and world championships and World Cups and whatever. I think, I still was like frustrated that I didn't have quite the financial success that I had hoped that winning a medal would, like I had a job that next summer, like won a medal at the Olympics, still had a part-time job at a bike shop.
It's that whole frustrating thing that you always have had. It's like you've always had success, but there's been that one other thing that's been whatever puts the chip on your shoulder. And this time it's like, shit, you hit your goal. You got yourself a medal at the Olympics, which not many other people can say, but you're still working and struggling. And everybody would think an Olympic medalist doesn't have to work.
Yeah, like my mom's friends were like, oh, he's set for life now. And she's like, no, he still has a job. And yeah, like, again, like I worked part-time. It wasn't like to keep bread on the table, but like it was to just like keep the dream alive. Like I
live an expensive lifestyle.
I have expensive taste, like I remember there's a long period of my life where like the bikes that went on top of my car were worth more than the car that I was driving. Like very much the case of my taste in life. And so like, yeah, like I just like buckled back down and like kept grinding and had success. Like it sort of like continued to keep happening. Like I had more World Cup podiums, and then the Olympics are every 4 years. You go through the peaks and valleys, and like, as you approach a games, like the year prior, your results are important to the way that the US Olympic Committee is like expected, non-expected, right? Like the way that contracts go out, Visa comes in or Toyota or whoever, and they're like, oh, this person's on the up, we're going to offer them a contract. The year prior to the 2018 Olympics, like that was the best World Cup season I ever had. I had 4 World Cup podiums that season. So I got to go do all the cool NBC press stuff. Like I was firing on all cylinders, and I had signed some good contract deals, and things were like working in my favor. Like 2017 was the first summer of my life I didn't have I didn't have a job to support my snowboard career. And I was buckled down. I was training really hard and didn't make the team in 2018.
How does that happen?
I chose the wrong start gate. I got 4th. You had to be top 3 at a World Cup to officially punch your ticket. And I got 4th at a World Cup. And so if you didn't meet the top 3 criteria, they took the average of your best 2. And Baumgartner had 4th and like a whatever, call it a 9th or an 8th or something. And I had like a 4th and a 12th. And so it's just straight math. Like God, that was heartbreaking. That was like, I was expecting to go. There was external expectations and internal expectations.
Like that's the best you're ever riding. Like this is, you're in your prime.
Yeah. It was the best I had ever snowboarded and ever done. And, like the event that I got fourth at was Trevina, Italy. And I still remember that race. I had third choice of lane and I picked the wrong gate and ended up getting fourth. If I had gotten third, I would have gone. I would have gone and competed. And I went as an alternate. Like I went to Korea in 2018 and sat on the sidelines. I was coaching. I remember like standing on the side of the hill, like filming and being on the radio and talking to my teammates. And if one of them had gotten hurt, like I would have competed.
But how tough is that too when you're coaching these guys, but in 2 weeks, I'm going to be out there trying to kick their ass. Even though we're on the same team, I'm still going to be trying to beat them. It's just, I'm not allowed to race in this one.
You swallow your pride. I don't know. Like you can treat it any way you want. Like it's an opportunity. Like I got to be at the Olympics supporting people that are my teammates. Did I want to be there? Abso-fucking-lutely. Was it heartbreaking? Like so painful. I went to those Olympics and sought out a bunch of media opportunities and filmed with the Olympic Channel and made money doing that. And
so you hustled. You got some stuff done. Yeah. You got your name out there. You kept yourself in the limelight.
I definitely hustled my ass off. But like I could have not helped them. I could have not like gotten on the radio and told them what I was seeing. But like, what does that accomplish? Like
that's a bad teammate if you're not going to do that. And speaking of that, you're in a team sport, but really it's all about yourself. I mean, at the end of the day, while you want everybody else to do well, you want yourself to do better. And are there bad teammates who don't think that way, who only think about themselves and don't share any information and are just assholes? Or is everybody pretty much good?
They're all different. It was a big team. Certain people kept a lot of stuff closer to their chest. Like they wouldn't share like, hey, I tried this line and it feels faster. Or like this is what's really working for me. Or let me support, let me help you like work on this skill set or whatever. And like that friction going into the Olympics, it tears teams down. It tore our team down. And my coach realized that when we're fighting against each other, nobody wins. Like if you work together, everyone will get better. And it is easy to say from the coach chair, but so impossible when you're like, fuck these guys. I want that Olympic spot. I want that Olympic medal. Like you sort of narrow your focus. You build up walls, you box people out. And then looking at it from the coach perspective is like, you guys are riding like shit because you're all angry and pissed at each other. If you're not willing to work together to get better, then like the other teams are going to win. So there's certain teammates that kept more information to themselves and certain shared more and like certain people got more friction. And the challenge that you bring up, we are on a team. I was on the US snowboard team. I was on the Olympic team. But you damn well better believe that I was out there like competing for myself. It is an individual sport. If my teammate is in the gate next to me, I want to beat his ass just as much as the dude from Austria or the kid from Australia or whatever it is. Your teammates before and after the gate drops and you cross the finish line. But like as soon as you're in the ring, it's every man for himself.
Fair enough. And then when you think about it, that Olympics, you're a coach in that one. But you have another Olympic run in you, and you are all set to go for China. I think you had your Olympic spot punched, and it's like you're 36, so you're really in your prime at this point. It's like if you had knowledge beforehand at 32 and were skiing your best, at this point, I would think you'd really have what you need to get on a podium again. And then Cortina happened. What can you take us through what happened?
Yeah, so, I mean, to lengthen it out, like, after the 2018 Olympics, didn't get to go. I was heartbroken and I was like, what am I doing with my life? Like, am I just going to be a snowboarder forever? Like, what's next after this? And I actually, in 2019, like kind of tried to retire. I started applying for like real corporate jobs. I got a job with one of my former sponsors and it was like a big kid job. Like I was making more money than I had ever imagined I would make. And I was like, all right, like I'd signed like one contract deal. I told my employer, I was like, I got to go do a few events, skipped a few events, skipped some training camps, went to an event and stood on the podium in 2020, which was right before the world shut down. COVID sort of changed the trajectory of like, I was on my way out. Like I was retiring. I got a job.
You're going to be a Lululemon guy.
Yeah, I got a job at Lululemon. Like, it was an amazing job. I worked with amazing people. It was awesome. It was such a sweet gig. I was making a ton of money, and I was like, no, like, this is sweet. Like, I'm going to go climb the corporate ladder. And then COVID shuts the world down. I snuck onto a podium. I got a World Cup podium in Big White Canada. My teammates are like, oh, I guess we need to retire so that we can get up there. Like, oh, you're going to skip training camps and come do this. And I'm like, yeah, I guess it worked out. COVID shuts the world down. You know, my sweet job sort of changes. They restructure. I get laid off. And I'm like, well, fuck, I guess the Olympics are next year. Like, I might as well make another run for it. And like, buckled down, trained my ass off, like trained so much harder. All of the built up anger and resentment from not qualifying in 2018, like, went into all those training sessions. And then, yeah, like, I was snowboarding. I believe that I was some of the best snowboarding that I had ever done. My results weren't great going into 2022 in Beijing, but like, my snowboarding was there, and I punched my ticket. Like, I got an official Olympic invite. We go to Cortina. It's a World Cup event. And my coach always said that, like, if you put yourself on ice before the Olympics, you're never going to perform at those games. And so, like, just because I had my ticket punched to the games, I went to Cortina and I was like, this is a tune-up.
You're there to win, right?
Yeah, I'm there to race as hard as I can and do as well as I possibly can. And went around a turn over a roller, you know, like, skipped when I should have jumped, crashed, and woke up in the hospital 2 days later. Had a serious, like, a traumatic brain injury. I had 2 brain bleeds, and I don't remember any of it. Like, I don't remember anything from that day. I don't remember breakfast. I don't remember training. I don't remember the run. I remember being in Cortina prepping for the Olympics, trying on my Olympic uniforms and doing all this stuff. And then I woke up in the hospital, and my wife, who was 7 months pregnant, was sitting at the foot of my bed. And I was like, what are you doing here? And she's like, well, you had a pretty bad crash. And I'm like, I had a main line coming out of my neck. And I'm like, yeah, I can see that. I'm like, are you okay? And she's like, no, I'm pretty worried about you. I'm like, is the baby okay? And she's like, the baby's fine. And I'm like, what day is it? She's like, it's Monday. And Monday was the day I was supposed to leave for the Olympics in Beijing. And I turned to her and I was like, probably not going to the Olympics, huh? And she's like, no, sweetie, like, you're not going to the Olympics. And I closed my eyes, went back to sleep for like another 13 hours.
Oh, geez, man.
So heartbreaking. Yeah. Like, I punched my ticket, didn't make it in 2018. Like, talk about a redemption story. Fuck these haters. Like, I can do it. Made my way to the Olympics. And then the world had other plans for me. But when I think back about it now, is it heartbreaking? Like, yeah, absolutely. Such a bummer that I didn't get to sort of write the end of my own story the way I had envisioned it. I walked out of the hospital on my own 2 feet. That is lucky. Kevin Pierce, one of my high school classmates, best in the world, crashed in a half pipe in the run up to the 2010 games. He was in the hospital for months. He couldn't drive for years. Like, I knew what traumatic brain injuries looked like. Like, I could have easily died. And so I was bummed that I didn't get to go to those games, but grateful that I walked out of the hospital on my own 2 feet and I got a chance to be a father and still get to snowboard. And it's not the way that I would have wanted to write my own story, but that's the way it panned out. And I'm grateful that we're doing this podcast right now. I'm sitting in my bibs. I was snowboarding earlier today. And yeah, I didn't get to go to 2022, but also I still get to keep riding.
Yeah, man. I mean, most people don't even get close to where you are in terms of athletic achievements. I mean, you're part of the 1% or even like a smaller percentage than that. And you should be proud of every single thing that you did in your career. And you were able to get an Olympic medal out of it, which is incredible. But we're at the end of the podcast. Before we get into my last segment of the show, I do want to bring something up because I think Sean Palmer was like a hero of yours. And then at one point you got to race against him, which has to be pretty incredible. Do you have a great Sean Palmer story?
Oh my God. So many great Palmer stories. Like, the fact that he was an idol of mine when I was a little kid, and then I got to be a teammate of his. You tell like teenager Alex that, like, he never would have believed you. God, like,
because he was everything that was cool in snowboarding. Like, all those people that might have clowned you for doing whatever you did, they were all in awe of Palmer, and you were in awe of Palmer. But I mean, I'm sure he didn't care what you did. He was just Palmer. No. He didn't care about anybody.
No, never gives. He still, to this day, I saw him a couple weeks ago. Like, doesn't give a shit about what anybody thinks. He does it the way he does. Palmer is, and like, again, mature appreciation. Palmer, what he did on a snowboard was amazing. What he did as an athlete is even more amazing. Like, he got second at world championships in downhill mountain biking. The dude made like 450 main on dirt bikes. Like, no other athlete, I don't believe, has ever done what he has accomplished athletically. It's just like hard for people to understand. It's hard to pick my favorite Palmer story.
You got a good Palmer fight story?
No fights, but a funny memory is like he was on the World Cup. We're training, competing, like trying to go to whatever Olympics it was. Like he's there. And, Palmer has a way with women. And, he had some relations with one of the French riders, and he wasn't looking for anything serious. And I think that she might have been looking for something more. And like, we were at Fist Lodging. So we're all staying in the same hotel. And like, he had sort of blown her off, and he's like standing there holding his food that he had gotten from like the buffet or whatever. And she just like walks over and she's like, "Hey, Sean." And he like turns and looks at her, and she just grabs his plate and like snorts and spits in his food and walks away. He just like stood there, didn't say a word, turns, walks over to the table, sits down and starts eating. Like, he's like, "Sorry." And like, just kept on keeping on. He's just like, "Nah, time to eat."
That's amazing. And I'm going to ask you one other person, or I'm going to ask you about one other person to tell a story, because I think you roomed with Nate Holland for a long time. And what's your best, Nate, I can't believe you're doing this, you're being such an idiot, Nate, story that might not have been funny back then, but is super fun to tell now?
Oh, God. Nate, great roommate. Like, such a pain in the ass. Funny stories, like, we're roommates, we're in Europe somewhere and fighting the jet lag. And I wake up at like 2:30 in the morning because he's crunching a Cliff Bar wrapper. He's eating because he's like, "What, man?" I'm like, "Dude, what are you doing?" He's like, "I was hungry." Like, did not give a shit that he like woke me up with his Cliff Bar wrapper. I'll never forget that. I think like the best Nate Holland stories, like that dude snowboarded hard, like one of the best American boardercross males that we've ever had. And he partied just as hard. And like, I remember being at an after party at Snowbird. We're at the Cliff Lodge. We're up in the top. There's a bar upstairs. We're partying like crazy. He's ordering drinks, and he's like waiting in line and didn't have time to like go to the bathroom. Just like unzipped his pants, took a leak on the side of the bar, and like the bouncer or somebody saw him, dragged him out of there, and they're like, "You're fucking out of here. You're done." So he goes back to his room and changes and like puts on a different hat and sneaks back into the party, and it's just like raging again, like just like time to go. Like, the dude had no quit in him, and like never could I ever imagine trying to keep up with the way that he partied. Like, such a legend then, still is now, but I'll never forget that. Like, we're partying at the Cliff Lodge and Spa, and he's just like, "Nah, this is a good enough spot to take a piss." Bouncer didn't seem to think so. He wanted to keep partying, changed his outfit, and got back up there and kept going.
All right. I ask about Nate as this is the last part of the show. It's a segment that I call Inappropriate Questions. You're well aware of this because we did this once. You asked Lindsay Jacob Ellis 3 inappropriate questions. I'm not even sure if you guys were even that tight or have been in the past 20 years, but you still asked her questions. That was awesome. But I was able to get Nate to ask 3 questions for you. And Nate was a lot tamer than I thought. And I guess it's because I talked to a couple different people. And while you say Sean Palmer was a ladies' man, everybody said about you that you liked to flirt, you were tall, good looking, and all the girls loved you and your hair, just that perfect coif. And that was your MO, but you're married now, so we're not going to talk about any of that. We're just going to say that that's out there just so people could know. But we're going to jump into your first inappropriate question from Nate, and here it goes.
What's up, Alex? Just wanted to remind you how lucky you were to have the best roommate on tour for all those years. Question number 1. What religious cult did you once belong to? Can you recommend any good cults for the listeners?
All right. What cult were you a part of?
So when I was real young, I was ignorant and didn't know how to like own my own athletic support. Call it like I wasn't superstitious. I was maybe just a little stitious. And I used to pray before I competed. And it was like a way for me to like put my results in someone else's hands. And I matured and got past that. But there was like a year that I lived in Mammoth. And I used to like, I drew like a cross on the back of my snowboard. I didn't know what I was thinking. And I got invited to like a church group, and another pro snowboarder invited, like, hey man, like you want to come, we do a little meetup. You want to come like meet, like, talk about, I went to like a church group meetup in Mammoth.
Tommy Shasheen?
Like, no, it wasn't Tommy. It was Luke Winan.
Okay.
So I was at the top of a half pipe event competing with him, and he's like, hey man, you want to pray? I'm like, yeah, I'll go pray. And like prayed at the top. And so like the next year he's like, you got to come to this church group. And I like went with Luke Winan, and it was not the relationship that I had grown up with religion. And it just made me uncomfortable. I was like, yeah, this isn't my vibe. I didn't hate on it. I'm still not hating on it. If that's what people want to go and do, like, sure, go ahead and do your thing. But like went to one church group, and I was like, nah, like that's not my cup of tea. I'll see you guys later.
All right. That is question number 1. We'll jump into question number 2.
In regards to our coaches, what athlete was the number 1 brown noser on our team? You or Graham? And in your opinion, what does the U.S. team brown noser podium look like? Give us gold, silver, and bronze.
You know what's funny about that question? I saw Graham Watanabe today on the mountain.
It's weird how that works, man.
Yeah. You know what? Like in reality, I would guess that I'm probably on the top step of that brown nose podium. Yes, I definitely kissed ass and tried to say all the right things and do what was needed, because defend myself here, like I was always fighting an uphill battle. Like I didn't have the sponsorship dollars that Nate had, and I didn't have the results that Lindsay had or whatever. Probably good call on Graham Watanabe being second. And thinking about who's bringing up the Coach Brown Nose podium. Oh, I'm trying to put some of my current teammates on blast, but they don't really brown nose. They're kind of like, we call them princesses now because they want everything the way that they want it. But
they're divas and high maintenance, and they can't handle like it was.
Yeah, God, I'm an old guy now. Nate and I love to bitch about like these prima donnas now. Probably, you know what? In a weird way, maybe I'll call out Nate's younger brother, Pat. He might take the third step on the brown nose podium behind me and Graham.
All right, there we go. We're going to jump into your final inappropriate question, and here we go.
All right, this is a multiple choice. What U.S. team superstar athlete did you lose your V card to? A, Seth Westcott, B, Lindsay Jacobellis, or C, Sean Palmer?
You know, Lindsay and I, we dated in high school. We certainly had our thing. But yeah, I mean, like the reality of who I lost my V card to, you know, is D, none of the above. But Lindsay and I dated in high school. It was awkward. It did not end well. It's probably why I went so soft on her in, you know, those uncomfortable questions. You know, like I've known Lindsay since we were like kids, and we dated in high school. Who knows what they're doing when they're dating in high school? You know, like she broke my heart. I broke her heart. It did not end well. And it being teammates for 20 years was always a little bit of that like lingering high school heartache that it didn't work out between the two of us.
All right. Well, I thank you for being honest in that answer. That's Inappropriate Questions, and that's the podcast. And while I know your name, before the podcast and researching you, I didn't know everything about your story, and now I know a lot more of it. But man, in looking at all your results and everything you did, it's like there needed to be that work hard, middle of the pack guy, because in looking at your career, if you look at the averages of all your races, your average is probably 22nd place. But in the biggest race of your entire life, you get on the podium, and that erases everything else. Who cares what you did in anything else in your entire career? You're an Olympic bronze medalist, and all the blood, sweat, and tears that you put into earning that bronze medal, that's how you're going to be defined for the rest of your life. And that's what your snowboarding career equates to. For yourself, it's obviously a lot more memories and travel and amazing snowboarding. But on paper, your resume is you're an Olympic bronze medalist. Not many people can say that about themselves. Thank you for telling your story, and thank you for your time.
Thanks so much for having me. I really appreciate it.
So that was time with Alex Deibold. And his career, like a lot of careers where you're fighting to get on a podium, well, it didn't end up on the podium that much. And while I would think that's frustrating, unless your name is Michaela Schifrin or Lindsey Vonn, it's so hard to have a ton of time on the podium and get comfortable being there. But you know what? Alex has had a long career in snowboarding. He's traveled the world, and he's received the education and experience that only comes from having the talent and desire to take your riding to the pro level in snowboarding. He's lived an amazing life, and he didn't get broken off too bad by snowboarding on his way to his Olympic bronze medal, and that's incredible. That's the show. Sorry for the short intro and outro. That's how it has to be for me this week. I have nothing left in my tank, but what I will ask you to do is review me wherever you listen, and if you use iTunes, here's how you do it. First, click the purple podcast icon on your iPhone. Second, search for the Powell Movement, and even if you already subscribe, you still have to do this. Third, scroll down to where you see my logo. Fourth, click my logo. Fifth, scroll down to where the ratings and reviews are. Sixth, star rate me with 5 stars, please, but you can rate me with whatever amount of stars you think I deserve. And seventh, if you feel up to it, you can actually leave a real review. The whole process takes less than a minute, and since I don't ask for much, it is greatly appreciated. What else is appreciated is you supporting my incredible sponsors. They are Elan Skis, Outdoor Research, Stanley, and Best Day Brewing. Have a great week, everyone.